Okay, wonderful. So I hope you can all see my slideshow title, Glass Plate Negatives, and we will be going from there. So today we are going to talk about glass plate negatives just generally. We'll talk about storage and handling on glass plate negatives, and then we will briefly go over one of the pieces that we touched on in our 2 glass plate negative workshops that we held last month. And that we'll be looking specifically at using your smartphone and how that can be used as a viewer for negatives or for taking images that can be used for reference or sharing for access purposes. Generally, might not consider them archival based on what the stats of your phone are, but are a good way to be viewing and sharing for access purposes those images of your glass plates. So like most things, most archival materials, and very specifically photographic materials, consistent temperature and relative humidity are one of the most important things that you can do for the ongoing preservation of your materials. When we're talking about glass plate negatives, those do fall into photographic materials classification, even though they are on glass. It's the emulsion piece that's bringing us into the photographic materials piece, and those are those fluctuations in temperature and relative humidity are quite damaging for photographic materials. So maintaining the consistency of that is really important for the ongoing preservation of glass plates. There is a range of temperature and relative humidity that we suggest for all archival materials, but when we're talking about photographic materials, cooler and drier is generally in a stable environment is the way that you should go. For photographic materials, something around 65 degrees Fahrenheit is pretty acceptable, and preferably your relative humidity would be around 30%. Then when we think about storage and the boxes for glass plates, one of the pieces that makes glass plates unique to archival materials and photographic materials in general is the weight, because of the plate of the glass plate. So we want to have ideally, you would use a pretty small box for glass plates just so that you're minimizing the weight that you would have in a box. So either you would use a smaller box, or you might underfill boxes to ensure that they're not too heavy, and then backfill that with foam or barrier board or something else that would fill up your box without filling it completely full with glass plates. There are also products designed specifically for glass plate negatives, and as you can see in this image here, there is a subdivision in this box. So these particular boxes are from Talus, but there are Hollinger Metal Edge has a box like this, which you can get through Gaylord or any of the other standard archival suppliers. But they create this subdivision for your glass plates so that you're only putting about 5 of those plates in each of those subdivisions, so that it's spreading out the weight. It also, and when you take one out, you won't have as much of a shift in how your boxes are. So those you can create those subdivisions yourself with barrier board or with foam or other padding, or look for these boxes that are specially designed for glass plate negatives. You also can see with the way that those barriers are there, that storing your glass plates vertically is how you should be putting them in boxes and storing them. In their original boxes that some of you may have in your collections, those boxes are designed to be horizontal. And so for that ongoing preservation, to kind of reduce the amount of weight that they would have stacked on top of each other, the vertical storage is really what you want to do to reduce any damage that could be caused to those glass plates due to breakage because of the weight that they would have on each other. There are some exceptions to that. So if you have broken plates, those are generally better to be stored horizontally and to be labeled that they're broken for sure, and minimal putting all those broken pieces together, broken plates together in one box and storing them horizontally would be best. You may also encounter, and later in this slideshow we'll show a picture of that, but some very large glass plates. So generally 8 by 10 and under is kind of the size that most of us would see in our glass plate negatives, but there are others that are quite large. And so you may find that if you have very large glass plates, that those are better stored horizontally with really a minimal amount of plates in a box, and having better storage enclosures for them that provide more support and padding for each of those plates. And again, that's the exception to the rule, and you would really only want to do it with a small amount of plates that would be stored together in one box. This slide shows examples of some other storage solutions. And while the ideal solution is to have smaller boxes with subdivisions specifically designed for them, the ideal is not always what we are going to encounter or have the resources for. So in this slide, we have examples of a box that's been subdivided with foam to kind of maximize the space that's in that size of a box with those likely 4 by 5 glass plates. So they've been subdivided with an archival foam. And then you can see in the middle section of that subdivision, there's additional foam that's been put in there to kind of fill that space and pad it. The other example, which is a pretty horrible, poor picture, but was the only one that I could really find that showed using a barrier board. There's only a few plates in that collection, and so that box is not full. So a piece of board was created to maintain those plates at a straight up and down vertical and fill up the rest of that space. And again, those are small plates. They work well with that particular type of divider that's there and support, but you would really want to be making sure that any support that you're putting in or any barriers that creating are going to be better for your glass plate negatives than not having something in there at all. But those are just a couple of examples of other kind of storage solutions that people have created in their collections. The next piece for storage is enclosures. And so there are a number of different recommendations, and the National Archives and Records Administration has one kind of recommendation, Canadian Archives has another. There are all different ways in terms of recommended storage for the enclosures in your boxes. And so one of the reasons that you want to have an enclosure in addition to having a box is that provides additional protection for the emulsion of the glass plate, and it also reduces any more exposure to light. So light is going to be a big issue that could cause damage to your photographic prints, negatives, and any sort of photographic material. So the ideal, again, recommendation for enclosures is a 4-flap envelope, which you can see in the image here. So these are made of buffered paper, neutral paper, and the 4 flaps are designed so that they will fold over each other and overlap fully. And this is best for these glass plate negatives because it reduces the amount of damage that could happen, ongoing damage that could happen to the emulsion if they're in just a sleeve. So pulling them in and out of a sleeve could catch on any flaking emulsion, could cause any sort of dragging of that emulsion along the paper, which could scratch it or lead to more flaking emulsion. So the 4-flap envelope reduces that need to kind of pull it out and cause any abrasion to the emulsion from paper. So that would be the ideal. And again, ideal doesn't work for everyone, but this would be in the case that you had something with damaged emulsion already, or you had a broken plate. The 4-flap envelope really would be what you would want to prioritize that for plates that were in kind of a damaged or poor condition. The second best way of doing things would be to have a polyester sleeve, so a polyester mylar sleeve that the negative is inserted into, and the best type of sleeve for that would be one that is an open style. So it's sealed on one side, and then on the opposite side it has a little flap that closes, that seals it on the other side. So again, it would be, you would be sliding things in and out of that polyester sleeve. You would be able to place it in, fold it up, and leave it in that polyester sleeve, ideally forever, unless you were digitizing something. And then that polyester sleeves plate could then be put into a paper sleeve. So again, the opaque light reduction that would happen there. And then the paper sleeve would be the one that you could label on that paper sleeve what the negative is, if it had a number. And so that would be kind of that second level of enclosure. You also could look for, there's also an envelope style of polyester sleeve and potentially paper sleeve, and that would be something that's sealed on two sides so that you're creating an L, but it would still be open at the top. So you would be able to kind of slip things in and out, and again, reducing the abrasion that might happen to the emulsion. The last kind of recommended way of doing things, and this would be if you have glass plates where they're in really great condition, the emulsion doesn't look like it's flaking, there's no damage to them, is to use just a paper sleeve, so buffered paper sleeve that's loose, so it's larger than what your plate is, so that you can kind of squeeze the edges of it and create space where you could pull the negative out without having any abrasion happen to the emulsion. So ideally, what we're looking for is that that you're storing them in individual enclosures, and that you're reducing the amount of out of abrasion that would happen as they're being pulled in and out of a sleeve or an envelope. So the next piece we're going to talk about is handling your glass plate negatives. So again, glass plate negatives are very fragile. They are often, the glass that's used for them is often pretty thin. And because they are photographic materials, all photographic materials can be damaged by the oils in our hands. So you should always, always, always wear gloves when you're handling any prints and negatives. And specifically for glass plates, because of the fragility of them, you should really only be using nitrile gloves. And so that is because you have a lot more dexterity with that glove that's form-fitting, that unlike cotton, it's not slippery, so you have some more tactile and dexterity that comes with those nitrile gloves. So cotton gloves also, they don't allow you the same tactile nature that you would have with a nitrile glove, but they also may, because of the texture that's with them, they may catch on emulsion that is flaking any sort of damage. Additionally, when we're talking about handling plates, you should always be holding them on two opposite edges. So with small plates, you can do that with one hand. With larger plates, as you can see in the image here, which is 17 by 19 inches, these are two hand plates always. And so you should be holding things on their opposite edges all the time, and trying to touch only the edge, just to reduce, again, how much damage could potentially happen to the emulsion on the plate. And except for cleaning and some scanning practices, you should always be placing your plates on flat surfaces with the emulsion side up. So when we're looking at our plates, the emulsion side is the side that looks a little more matte, and the glass side is the side that is a little more shiny. And sometimes it's a lot easier to determine that with others. For a plate that has a pretty light emulsion, it's sometimes hard to figure that out. But they do have two sides. So I used this image here for a number of reasons. One, because the South Street Seaport Museum has a nice blog post about the discovery and care of these glass plate negatives that were discovered, and because they are massive size. So 17 by 19 inches is not a common plate size, so these are pretty unique, but it does show that there's a range of sizes that you'll find in glass plates. But yes, so kind of with the handling, always use gloves, be very careful because you have fragile glass that you're working with, and again, always protect the emulsion. Um, if you do have, so kind of thinking about that too, if there are plates that are have flaking emulsion, and are quite damaged, and lots of flaking that's coming off, it's not impossible to repair that emulsion, but it does require professional conservation. And so if you do have plates that are in disrepair, the best thing to do is to make sure that you are using the best enclosure method possible for them. And you could reach out to a professional who would be able to tell you if it would be possible to do any repair of that emulsion or not. So the next thing to talk about is cleaning. And generally you would probably only want to do this like one time as you are cleaning them and then putting them into their proper enclosures and storing them. And your cleaning may happen if you are rediscovering a collection, or you're getting a new donation of them that comes in. So the one thing to know that you should never, ever, ever do is ever use any sort of cleaning solution or water or anything to clean the emulsion side of the plate. There are a couple different kinds of glass plate negatives. Generally, most of what we will see in our collections are silver gelatin. And so we want to make sure that no sort of water or cleaning solution comes in contact with that emulsion, because it will ruin your glass plate negatives. So when it does come to cleaning, the emulsion side should really only be dusted lightly. And you could use a very, very soft brush to lightly remove any dust or debris that might have collected on that side, being careful to avoid any damaged emulsion areas. Or you could use an air bulb, a manual air bulb, to kind of squeeze and use air to push the dust off. For the shiny side of the plate, the non-emulsion side of the plate, that's just glass. So very carefully, you can clean the glass side with distilled water or with a water and alcohol solution, but never any sort of chemical glass cleaners. And again, it is really only cleaning that side should really only happen if you notice that it is a very dirty plate and you can see that it looks really dirty, and you should always be doing that with care. Because again, any sort of water solution or wetness can cause damage to the emulsion on the other side of the plate. So now we're moving kind of away from those basics about storage and handling of your glass plates, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use your phone to view those negatives and kind of create some good enough images for reference and access purposes. So in thinking about that, kind of those basic principles and goals of archival digitization is that we want to produce digital images that look like the original records, and look like the original records at the appearance and condition of those records that we have them right now. So when we're imaging and we're taking pictures of those objects that we have, especially if we're doing archival digitization practice, part of that is capturing the moment that we have it. So we want to get the edges of the material. We want to see any deterioration or degradation that may have happened. The silvering is important for us to see. So that kind of initial capture in archival digitization is we're trying to create an evidentiary image. And then making copies of that would try to mimic what the photographer may have wanted that image to look like, and how they may have done some editing in their processing of their images, but that the consistency of our images is of high importance, and that we balance the quality and limitations that we have in our individual organizations and individual digitizations programs to get the best image that we can, but it may not be the very best image that someone else could get. So they're kind of just like some very basics of our archival digitization. And then we're going to talk about the process with a smartphone, which doesn't quite meet a lot of those archival digitization needs, but it certainly meets our needs to be able to see what these negatives actually look like, and to be able to share those and kind of promote our collections with other folks. So a really easy method to do that is by using a light source and a sturdy box with some holes cut in it so that you're creating like a black box environment. So the idea of that is you are reducing as much ambient outside light as possible and directing only light up through your negative so that you're getting a great image. So this picture here shows the phone on this black box that has been created to capture that, and you can kind of see in the phone screen the negative that's underneath. And so to do this, you need a box, preferably with a lid, and it should be sturdy. You need a light source, and so the best light source for this is an LED light board with some pretty specific specifications. So it should have a light temperature rating of 5,000 kelvins and a color rendering index of 90 plus. There are many light boards out there that are pretty affordable that meet those ranges. And the LED piece of it's important because it creates the best light for this. But you could also use something like a tablet, like an iPad, to create just this white screen. The caveat with that would be that because a tablet is a computer, those mini LEDs that are there can often create kind of light distortion in a photograph. So won't impact you very much if you're just using this process as a viewer to review what you have. But if you were to actually capture pictures, you may need to create kind of a diffused light by, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, diffuse the screen a little bit between your negative and your tablet screen so that you can reduce any sort of light grids that might show up. So there are a couple steps to creating this, and it's pretty easy. But the first thing you need to do is you need to create a hole for your phone camera to go in. And so you, depending on how large your box is, this particular one that I used allowed me to just put the hole in the top of the box wherever I felt like putting it, and then working from there. But you want to make sure that you're able to view that 4 by 5 inch area, and that will kind of depend on how tall your box is. So it should be about 5 inches high, and that is to kind of figure out your phone viewing area where it can focus and how much it can pull in. And so it'd be a little bit of trial and error for you to figure that out. But you'll cut a hole in the top that fits your camera. And the important piece for this is that you don't want the hole to be too large because you want your phone to be able to seal out all the exterior light. And you want to still have a very stable base for your phone to sit on. So that's the first step, is you cut a hole in the top of the box that accommodates your phone camera, and that will vary depending on what kind of a phone that you have. And then the next step is to cut a hole in the bottom of the box, and that will be for your negatives. So if all of your negatives are 4 by 5, then you can cut it a 4 by 5. If you have larger negatives, you might have to have a larger box and kind of figure things out. But using your phone and turning on your camera viewer, you can see where the space is going to be in the bottom of the box that you need to cut out. I used a piece of paper the size of the negative to sit in the bottom of the box, and I viewed when I could get the whole 4 by 5 negative in my camera viewer, traced that and cut the hole. And so this creates masking, like a masking material around your light box. You could do something similar if you had a sturdy box. You could create different masking material on your light board, and so that could be with a piece of black foam core, or something else that would mask out your light material. And then if you've got a box that just set over the top of it, that would also work. But ideally what you're doing is you're creating a stable platform for your phone to go on to reduce any vibrations that you have when you take the picture. And you want to mask as much of that light around your negative, so that you're just creating this very dark environment inside the box to take this picture with your camera. So your next step is to make sure that your negative is clean, and you want to be taking the picture with the emulsion side up, so that matte side is facing up. This makes it a little bit easier for cameras to focus on the image because it's not a reflective glass image, it's that matte image. So that's generally why we do that. One, because it's better for the emulsion not to be down on top of something, and two, because it's better for our cameras to be able to focus. You want to make sure that your light source is at its brightest setting. And again, this is where if you're using a tablet, some sort of semi-transparent piece of paper, glassine or vellum paper can be used as that diffuser between the screen and the negative, and that will help with better photographs that you would be taking. If you're also using a tablet, some of those are often set to night mode because it's better for our eyes when we're viewing them, but that is not better for capturing your images. So you would want to be using a cool or neutral light. You can change that in your settings on your tablets. With an LED light board, that should be set to the light source that you are looking for, and so you just want it to be as bright as possible. And then you would simply place your black box setup over your negative, put your phone into the cutout on the top, and then use your camera app to take a photograph of the negative. So you could also use this process to just simply view your negatives. So there are, for iPhones and for Androids, there are options for inverting the view of your phone. And this is the easiest way of just being able to view your negative as a positive. And so you'd be able to just view what it is, to see what you have, rather than going through the process of taking a bunch of photographs or digitizing everything. So the images here are what's on my iPhone 12. But you would go into kind of the accessibility settings on your phone device and look for your display, your text and display, or your display settings. And then both iPhones and Androids have this inversion setting. And so that inverts every single thing that's on your phone, including your camera. So then you can use your camera as an inverted viewer so that you can see your images in the positive rather than in the negative. So then if you were actually going to be taking photographs with your phone, in order to share them for access or to have them as reference or to be kind of that good enough digitization, first level of digitization that you would have, you would have to do some kind of basic edits. Because we are imaging our negatives through that emulsion side, they're flipped. So we'll be, all those images would be in the reverse. So you would first need to, you could also use this app, the Snapseed app, or your own camera app to do, many of those allow you to do a flip and to do some basic crops. So that you would always need to do that, is to flip your image, because we always know if you're photographing through or scanning through the emulsion side, image is going to be in reverse. The other piece, I bring up the Snapseed app by Google because it is really easy to use and it allows you to do a curve adjustment, which is how you change from the negative to the positive. So there are a number of tools that you would be using in the Snapseed app. It would be the crop tool, that rotate tool, which allows you to flip your image, and then the curves is where you would be changing from the negative to the positive. So with that curves tool, and this will be the same in other kind of, if you have Adobe products for your phone, this would also be a similar way where you're adjusting these curve levels. So basically we're swapping the lights and the darks, is what we're doing when we're changing the curve. So in the Snapseed app, the curves tool, the screen looks like this. The image that we have on the left is that original negative image. You can see that the curve line, the diagonal line, goes from the bottom left to the top right. And you need to just drag and drop that line so that it's going opposite. So it'll start in the top, the top left to the bottom right. So you're really just swapping it, and it happens immediately, and you can see that it's there. And then that Snapseed app lets you export a copy of that. So you don't even have to make those changes in your initial image that you make. You can export that as a copy that'll be saved elsewhere on your phone. So it's a really easy app to work with. You can capture those images through the app and have them all there, or you can capture your images and do some basic editing on your phone if you like that better, and then you can import them into the app just to do the curve adjustment. So it makes it a pretty easy way to get these access images that you have. And again, they're based on, you're limited to what your phone can do. So the megapixels of your phone camera will determine kind of the quality of the image that you get. And all phones they're going to be slightly smaller in terms of the resolution of their images. So they're not going to be like the most amazing images, but they work really well for sharing on screens. It's often pretty hard to tell the difference between what you're getting in your phone and what you're getting on the scanner when we're looking at them on the screen. Now, it might change if you were printing things out or you were enlarging them for some other sort of print project, but this is a pretty easy way to get a good enough image to share on screens or to share with other folks. So I'll talk really briefly about our mobile digitization unit. So through the VHRP, we have a bunch of different setups for scanning and for photographing and creating images. And as part of our mobile digitization unit with the VHRP, we also work with you on logistics planning. We have templates for descriptive metadata. We provide training on using the equipment or provide scanning bee days where we actually show up and work with you there. And we walk through kind of some selection criteria to evaluate what materials would be best for a digitization project. So our mobile digitization unit, we have a copy stand, camera with lens, and then Adobe Lightroom software. Those kind of get bundled together as one type of digitization unit. We also have an Epson Perfection V850 Pro photo scanner. And this is a great workhorse for scanning transparencies and reflective documents or images. And then we have two Epson V600 photo scanners. And so those work for negatives and slides, but don't work for odd sized transparencies, versus the V850 does work for a variety of sizes of things. But we also have two of those that are available. So we have equipment that's available through a mobile digitization unit, and you would just work with us at the VHRP to talk about a project that you have, and how we would kind of deploy that equipment or work with you on a project with our digitization program. There are some additional resources here. So one of the things that we talked a lot about in our workshop was FADGI technical guidelines for digitizing cultural heritage materials, which are dense and there's a lot there, but they're pretty good. They're a really good standard for what the best practices for digitization are. I have a couple resources here for the kind of care and handling of photographs, and glass negatives fit into those, which are some pretty basic overview of working with things. There's a YouTube video here for how to digitize glass plate negatives, and that's with an overhead copy stand photography. And then also here is the Charles Bliss glass plate negatives collection that Barnett worked with our mobile digitization unit. We did 2 days of scanning bees with a bunch of volunteers in that area and scanned about 500 glass plate negatives through that process with those 2 days of scanning. And that Preservica starter portal is some images from their collection. So I will send this slideshow out to folks that were here viewing this presentation, so that those links are available. And that is the end of my slideshow, so we can go ahead and stop recording.